I've shared this before on Let's Not Meet. This happened around 7 years ago at the time. I was living with a roommate and going to school, and I was around 22. I'm a female, by the way. It was a weekday evening, and my roommate had informed me that she was going out clubbing and staying over at another friend's house. She had invited me, but I didn't really feel like going. Instead, I made plans to sit on my ass, watch junk TV, and work on some homework. Around 10 p.m., I went to the gas station to get some candy and energy drinks. Remember that day pretty well because I had gotten out of classes pretty early and had just gotten my hair done, and I was feeling pretty confident and cute. I went into the gas station, and there was 3 guys, probably in their 20s, just lurking around. They just looked like your average frat boys, and I remember that one had shaggy blonde hair and was covered in tattoos. I noticed one of them nudge the other and nod in my direction as I picked out my snacks, but I didn't pay much mind. They paid before I did and left. After I got my stuff, I walked out to the parking lot and saw them sitting in a beat-up, shitty car, and all 3 of them seemed to be staring at me. I hopped in my car and headed back to my house, which was literally only a few minutes from the gas station, and they started their car and followed. I didn't think much of it, figuring they were probably just heading the same direction as I was. However, I lived pretty deep in a subdivision with a lot of turns, and after a minute of pulling in and making several turns, I noticed they seemed to be following me. I got nervous since I knew I was home alone, so I kept driving past my house, pulled out of the neighborhood, and back onto the main road, and they were still following. I just drove for a while, and they sped up and really started getting close. Then they started flashing their lights and actually pulled up next to me and rolled their window down. The part of me that has faith in humanity thought, what the fuck? Do I have a low tire or something? But when I looked over and saw them leering at me, I knew it wasn't anything like that, and I immediately began to panic a little. We were on a more deserted stretch of road now, and they were swerving almost like they were going to bang into my car, but I just sped up. All I could think was, should I drive to the police station? It's like 15 minutes away from here and there's a ton of stoplights on the way. What if I have to stop and they block my car or something? Fortunately, by this point, I was getting somewhat close to my sister's house. She lives pretty close to me, 15 minutes away, but in the opposite direction of the police station. My hands were shaking and I was trying to navigate the road with these idiots speeding up and slowing down and trying to nudge me off the road. But I picked up my phone and dialed my sister. She answered on the 4th ring. Without preamble, I immediately asked her if Josh, her husband, was home. She sounded confused, but said yeah. Josh is in the military, and I knew he owned guns. He's a good guy, but we didn't really talk much, and I never felt particularly close to him or anything. I said, tell him to get his gun and come out to the driveway, please. By this point, I was near tears. I dropped the phone, and one of those threw something, I think a plastic Coke bottle, at my driver's side window when they sped up near me. I finally saw my sister's house and pulled into her driveway. The entire house was dark. No porch light, nothing. I was so fucked. I misheard her. They weren't even home, and there aren't any neighbors that would be close enough to run to. The guys pulled up behind me so I couldn't back out of the driveway, and they all jumped out. They all started walking up to my car, and one of them even reached for the handle and yanked on it. By this point, I was fumbling for my phone again. Was thinking, do I have a weapon here? Should I grab my phone and try to run? Should I back over these bastards or just stay locked in the car? In the split second that I looked up, 2 things happened. First, I made eye contact with the shaggy-haired blonde guy who was the one yanking on my door. He didn't look angry or drunk or anything. His eyes were dead and predatory. While I was frozen in terror, he looked cold, like he had done this kind of thing before or something. The other guys were trying my other doors, but I couldn't break eye contact with the blonde, who was inches from my face and only separated by a glass window. Second, I finally saw a shape move behind him in the darkness. All the guys stopped and looked, and my hero, my brother-in-law, stepped out of the shadows, creeping up from behind the house. He pointed his gun at them and told them to get the f*** out of there. They ran back to their car and sped off, screaming profanities at Josh and me. When they left, my sister ran outside and brought me in. The driveway scene sounds in writing like it took a long time, but in reality, it was only a few minutes. Because of that, and because of how dark it was, we didn't get the guy's plate number. We called the police and they came out to get our statements. They said they would have someone patrol the area to keep an eye out for any cars that were the same make, model, and color, but that it would be hard to catch the guys without the license plate number. Unfortunately, nothing ever came of it. I can only wonder what they wanted with me, what they were planning for me, or what would have happened if Josh hadn't been there. It was a moonless night, the kind that swallows the world in darkness. I found myself driving down a desolate stretch of highway, the only illumination coming from my headlights cutting through the blackness ahead. The road seemed to wind endlessly through dense woods, and the stillness was suffocating. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, a flicker of movement caught my eye. A pair of headlights appeared far behind, almost too distant to discern. My heartbeat quickened as I realized they were gaining on me, closing the gap with each passing moment. Unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Why would someone be following me on this isolated road at such a late hour? Tried to push away paranoid thoughts, focusing on my driving, but the headlights continued to draw nearer, casting an ominous glow in the darkness. I told myself it was probably just another traveler, but the feeling of being watched persisted. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, and I resisted the urge to glance back again. Instead, I increased my speed, hoping to put some distance between us. The road twisted and turned, the forest pressing in from all sides. Shadows danced on the periphery of my vision, playing tricks on my mind. I stole another look in the mirror. The headlights were closer now, unmistakably following my every move. I needed to lose them, find a way to shake off this pursuer. Without a clear plan, I made a sharp turn onto a narrower side road, hoping to catch them off guard. The headlights followed suit. I pushed my old car to its limits, weaving through the labyrinth of winding lanes. The headlights behind me mimicked my every maneuver, relentless in their pursuit. Panic clawed at my chest, and I began to fear the worst. Was this some kind of malicious game? As I approached a fork in the road, a risky idea formed in my mind. Without hesitation, veered left, then abruptly turned off my headlights and cut the engine, coasting into the shadows. I held my breath, heart thundering in my ears. Seconds stretched into eternity as I waited, straining to hear any sign of my pursuer. Silence enveloped me like a suffocating blanket. Just when I thought I couldn't stand it any longer, a distant rumble of an engine reached my ears. Relief washed over me as the headlights zoomed past the fork in the road, continuing down the path I had abandoned. They faded into the distance, leaving behind only the echo of their engine. I sat there in the darkness, trying to steady my breathing. Who were they? And why had they been following me? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered and unsettling. After what felt like an eternity, I dared to restart my car and cautiously continued my journey. The road ahead seemed less menacing now, the shadows less threatening. As the first hints of dawn broke on the horizon, I finally reached a more populated area, a town bustling with early morning activity. The events of the night felt surreal, like a waking nightmare. I parked my car in a well-lit area, grateful for the safety of civilization. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed the local police station. Maybe they could make sense of what had happened and provide some reassurance. As I waited for an answer, I glanced back down the road I had traveled. A chill ran down my spine, but I knew one thing for certain: I had escaped, and for now, that was enough. The engine of my old truck sputtered to life with a hesitant cough, its headlights piercing through the thick mist that clung to the roadside. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling a bead of sweat trickling down my neck despite the chill in the air. Beside me, Amy, who was my girlfriend at the time, sat silently, her eyes wide and alert. "Are you sure about this road?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rumble of the engine. I nodded, trying to sound confident despite my own doubts. The directions had been vague, promising a shortcut through these backcountry roads to bypass the highway traffic we'd encountered earlier. The isolation was unsettling. The road narrowed ahead, flanked by towering trees that loomed ominously in the shadows. The headlights struggled to penetrate the darkness beyond. I could feel Amy's gaze fixed on me, her silent anxiety palpable in the confined space of the truck cabin. "Did you see that?" Amy's voice broke the uneasy silence. I frowned, following her gaze. In the distance, through the swirling mist, a figure appeared, a silhouette standing motionless by the roadside. My foot instinctively eased off the accelerator as we approached. "Do we stop?" Amy whispered, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure remained eerily still, almost unnaturally so. As we drew closer, a sense of foreboding washed over me. It was a man, his features obscured by shadows, dressed in tattered clothes that fluttered in the breeze. "We should keep going," I finally managed to say, my voice strained. But as we passed him, I stole a glance in the rear-view mirror. The figure hadn't moved, and a chill ran down my spine. Minutes dragged by like hours as the road twisted and turned through the dense woods. The trees seemed to lean closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Amy had fallen silent, her fingers gripping the edge of her seat. Suddenly, the truck's headlights picked up a flickering light ahead. "Why is there a light on?" Amy's voice was barely above a whisper. I shook my head, my mind racing. The house looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and paint peeling. But there, in an upstairs window, a single light flickered like a beacon. "We need to get out of here," Amy said urgently, echoing my thoughts. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and pressed down on the accelerator. The truck surged forward, the engine roaring in protest. Just as we passed the house, the light abruptly went out. The sudden darkness sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced in the rear-view mirror again, but the house had vanished into the night. The road stretched endlessly before us, each mile adding to my unease. Questions swirled in my mind. Were we lost? I thought we stumbled onto some forgotten, haunted stretch of road. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, the trees thinned, and the road straightened. Up ahead, the glow of streetlights came into view. Pulled onto the main road, the weight of the night's events settling on my shoulders. I stole a final glance in the rear-view mirror, half expecting to see shadows lurking in the darkness. But the road behind us was empty. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew we had escaped just in time. And as we left that strange stretch of highway behind, I vowed never to go there again.